Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
Ever since I finished renovating the guest house behind my Santa Barbara home last summer, I've poured every ounce of energy and every extra penny into making it a haven for anyone I cared about, even if that meant sacrificing my own comfort and privacy to play the role of the always welcoming, never complaining daughter who never asks for anything in return. I remember the exact shade of pale seafoam paint I chose for the living room walls because it reminded me of calm ocean waves on a stormy day, and I even installed wind chimes that chimed softly whenever a light breeze passed through, hoping that any visitor would feel as though they had momentarily escaped their own troubles. My parents have always relied on me to be the peacemaker in the family, the one who never dared to upset the fragile balance, and in return they gave me the title of the chill baby sister, who never stirred the pot even when everything inside me felt like it was boiling over. I spent countless afternoons mopping floors, mowing lawns, and mowing over my own feelings so that no one would accuse me of rocking the boat. And every time my phone rang with my father's number flashing on the screen, I braced myself for another request that would leave me aching and exhausted, but still grateful to be needed. Everything changed on a random Tuesday morning when I was scrolling through my feed and saw a story highlight from my friend Erica showing a panoramic view of a Hawaiian sunset with the caption, "Family Vaki, best decision ever." I felt my heart drop into my stomach as I recognized my father standing beside my mother, both beaming in aloha shirts that I had bought them as a Christmas gift, and then Brianna sauntering into frame wearing a flower crown, arms wrapped around her new husband Tom's waist as if they owned the entire island. I stared at that screen for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering over the follow button on their profiles even though I had been following them both for years, wondering why not one of them had thought to invite me to share a single moment of this manufactured paradise. My breathing quickened when I realized that every snap and boomerang had been carefully curated to exclude me, and I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the image to vanish so I could pretend it wasn't really happening. Flashback to exactly 4 weeks earlier, when Brianna had texted me late at night after one too many glasses of white wine, saying, "Hey sis, we're planning a trip, but I kind of don't want any drama this time around, so you should probably just sit this one out." Okay. I had laughed it off without a second thought because I believed in my sister's good intentions and I told myself she was just trying to keep things light. I replied with a cheerful emoji and a promise to send them directions to my favorite beach in case they ever decided to add a day trip, never once imagining that her offhand message was a cold instruction to keep my distance. My parents had called me separately afterward, both saying, "We don't really know if we're going yet, we just wanted to see what Brianna wanted to do," and I had accepted their uncertainty as truth, because I had always been the unquestioning daughter who trusted their judgment no matter how many times they left me out of important plans. I remember nodding along to their voices on the phone, convinced that they were simply honoring Brianna's wishes without realizing they were actively excluding me. As the Instagram story played on loop, each snapshot of shimmering waves and coconut cocktails felt like a slap across my face, and I suddenly understood that all the reassurances from my parents had been nothing more than carefully crafted lies. I tried calling my father, but he didn't pick up, and when I sent a text saying, "Are you guys okay?" I got only a thumbs up emoji in response, as if the absence of any real words would erase the hurt. My mother's voicemail box was full, which I found suspicious because she's usually the first to leave me rambling messages about what she cooked for dinner. I stared down at my phone in disbelief, a cold rage bubbling up inside me that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. At that moment, I realized I had two choices: swallow my pride and pretend everything was fine, or do something they would never see coming. I paced the length of the guest house living room, my shoes clicking against the hardwood floors I had polished with my own hands, thinking about all the times I had tiptoed around my sister's moods and my parents' whims. Then I remembered the look on Brianna's face when she had glided through the guest house door months ago with Tom in tow, as though she possessed some unspoken right to occupy my space without gratitude. I thought of the late nights I stayed up praying that someday our family would act like a team rather than a collection of entitled tourists. So when their plane finally touched down on that lush Hawaiian runway, I made a single phone call to my property manager with my voice steady and calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I told him exactly what he needed to do: change every lock on the guest house door by sunrise, disable the keypad code, and refuse entry to anyone who couldn't prove they had my explicit permission. I hung up the phone and walked back to the front door, imagining the shock in Brianna's eyes when she tried the handle and found herself locked out of the only place she had called home for half a year. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just shutting a door on my sister and her husband, but on every excuse that had ever been used to keep me on the sidelines of my own family's life. And the best part was that they would never see it coming. When I agreed to let Brianna and Tom stay in my guest house last spring, I did it out of a sense of duty more than affection, because deep down I knew they'd never actually return the favor if the situation were reversed. They've been planning to do a full gut renovation on the hideous beige ranch house they bought across town, some mid-century monstrosity with avocado green tiles and carpeting that hadn't been replaced since the Reagan administration. And of course nothing was ready on time, because Brianna had vision but zero ability to manage a contractor or a timeline. At the time, it felt like the kind thing to do, offering them a clean, modern, fully furnished guest house that had its own private entrance, a brand new split unit A, C, and even a tiny fenced patio. I told them they could stay for 3 months, maybe 4 if things ran long, and in return I asked for just one simple thing: let me know when people are coming and treat the place like it's not yours. But that rule was broken within the first week, and it only got worse from there. Tom had his friend from work sleeping on the pull-out sofa for almost a week without asking, and I only found out because I went out to water the succulents one morning and saw someone's naked torso through the kitchen window eating cereal in boxers that definitely weren't Tom's. Brianna brushed it off with a laugh and said, "He's harmless. He was just in between leases," as if I ran a halfway house instead of offering them free lodging. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to make it awkward, but it chipped away at something inside me I couldn't quite name yet. When the power bill doubled in July, I didn't complain. When they left wet towels on the outdoor furniture, I just replaced the cushions. I gave and they took, and I kept telling myself it was only temporary. Fast forward 6 months, and they were still there, their renovation delayed again, and by then it was clear they had no real motivation to move out. They had their own little life set up. Delivery drivers knew the guest house address better than I did, and I was getting used to finding Tom's protein shake containers in my recycling bin and hearing Brianna's loud Zoom calls through the wall. It wasn't unbearable, but it was intrusive, and worse than that, it was ungrateful. Not once had they offered to help with maintenance or even mow the backyard, which they had full access to, by the way. No offer to pitch in on utilities, no dinner invites, not even a thank you card tucked under my door. So when I changed the locks the morning they landed in Hawaii, it wasn't just a petty impulse, it was the slow release of 1,000 resentments that had built up like pressure in a valve I could no longer ignore. I sat on my front steps that evening with a glass of wine, the new keys sitting heavy in my palm, knowing full well that the second they tried the door and couldn't get in, my phone would start lighting up. It didn't take long. The first call came from Tom, and I didn't pick up because I wasn't in the mood to listen to him breathe heavily through his nose like a bull who'd been denied his favorite hay. Then came the texts. "Vanessa, what the hell? The code isn't working." Then, "Are you serious right now?" Then, "Call me back or I'm getting a lawyer." That one made me laugh out loud, because if there's one thing Tom isn't going to do, it's hire a lawyer to fight for access to a property he never paid $1 to live in. Then Brianna's voicemail dropped, and her voice was cracked and wobbly like she'd just lost a limb instead of temporary shelter. "Vanessa, how could you do this to us? We're homeless now. You didn't even warn us. We're literally across the ocean and you're throwing us out? What kind of sister does that?" And that's when I snapped. Because what kind of sister orchestrates an entire family vacation and excludes her own blood with a flippant, "I just don't want drama"? What kind of sister lives under your roof for over half a year, eats your groceries, hogs your Wi-Fi, and never once says thank you? I told my mom they'd been living here rent-free for almost a year. That's like, what, 18 months? And not a single thank you card. Not one. Nothing. My mom didn't even acknowledge that part. She called and left a message, her voice syrupy and calm, like she was trying to keep a toddler from throwing a tantrum. Vanessa, honey, I don't think this was the right way to handle it. We just wish you'd been more supportive of your sister. She didn't want drama. That's all. She just wanted a peaceful trip, and now she's very hurt. And there it was. Not a single question about why I felt excluded. Not a shred of curiosity about my side of the story. Just another episode in the long-running show called Keep Brianna Happy at All Costs, featuring Vanessa as the silent extra who stands quietly in the background holding the boom mic, while the star gets all the attention. I didn't call her back. I didn't call any of them back. Instead, I sat in the kitchen of my own house, the one I pay for, the one I keep spotless, and stared out the window toward the now empty guest house, imagining it without Tom's sweat-stained gym bag in the hallway or Brianna's essential oil diffuser pumping fake lavender into the air. It looked peaceful. For the first time in a long time, it looked like mine again. And I thought, let them cry. Let them tell the whole family that I'm heartless and cold and vindictive. Let them spin whatever story they need to so they can sleep at night. But this time, I'm not cleaning up the mess. This time, the drama they tried to avoid is exactly what they brought on themselves. It started as a scribble on the back of a grocery receipt I pulled from the bottom of my purse while sitting alone at the kitchen counter, the late afternoon light slanting in sideways like it was trying to hide from what I was about to do. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry, either, not in the chest-pounding, dish-breaking way I used to be when I was 20-something and everything felt like the end of the world. No, this was a different kind of fury, one that had settled into my bones like cold air in an old house. I had spent the last few days playing back every moment, every conversation, every favor I had done for my family in the past year like a broken film reel on repeat. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how easy it had been for all of them to take and take and take, while I just kept saying yes like some kind of emotional vending machine that never ran out of free snacks. So I wrote it down. Not for them at first, but for me. I started with the dog surgery because that was the big one, $3,000 for an emergency procedure when Brianna and Tom's golden doodle swallowed part of a corn cob and was hours from a ruptured intestine. They had called me in tears from the vet's parking lot, credit cards maxed out, savings drained from the wedding, and I didn't even hesitate. I wired the money without asking when they'd pay me back, and I remember telling them, it's just money. He's family. They promised to Venmo me monthly. That was 10 months ago. Not $1 has shown up. Then I added Thanksgiving, the year their oven blew a fuse 2 days before the holiday, and my mother called me in a panic asking if I could just host this once. I roasted 2 turkeys because Brianna's husband didn't like dark meat, made gluten-free stuffing from scratch because suddenly my sister had a sensitivity, cleaned the entire guest house for out-of-town relatives who never even said thank you, and then watched everyone leave before dessert because someone had brought their new boyfriend and apparently he was a lot. Next came the car. Tom's transmission exploded during a weekend trip to Monterey, and instead of renting a car or calling AAA like a functioning adult, he texted me asking if he could borrow mine just until Wednesday. I handed him the keys, didn't ask questions, and ended up driving a rental for 3 weeks that smelled like cigarettes and spilled root beer while my own car racked up miles and came back with a dent no one would explain. I wrote down all the little things too. Picking up their mail while they were on their honeymoon part 2 in Napa. Babysitting their dog while they went to a silent meditation retreat. Recommending my dentist, my hairdresser, even my therapist. Always the one offering. Always the one available. The words filled the paper like a court record, line after line of unpaid emotional debt, and by the time I stopped, I had flipped the page over and kept going on the back. When I was done, I didn't edit it. I didn't clean it up. I snapped a photo of the full list, typed out the phrase, just for the record, and sent it as a group text to Brianna, my mom, my dad, and Tom. Then I put my phone down, poured myself a glass of wine, and turned it face down on the counter because I didn't want to see it light up. I didn't expect an apology, but I wanted silence to do its job for once. 2 full days passed. Nothing. Not a word, not even a bubble showing someone was typing. On the 3rd day, my dad sent an email with the subject line perspective. I opened it with one eye closed, already bracing for the content like someone waiting to get hit with a tennis ball they saw coming. It was 2 paragraphs long, full of the usual tidy sentences that sound wise until you realize they're empty. He listed what he believed were reasons you might have overreacted, including "we didn't think you'd want to come," and "you've always said you value your independence." There was a bullet point about how Brianna had been going through a stressful time with the house remodel and how we were just trying to make things easier for everyone. But what knocked the air out of my chest came at the very end, in a single line with no formatting, no buffer, just a dagger disguised as a sentence. "You've always been too sensitive. That's why your marriage didn't work out either." It didn't come with a smiley face or a sign-off. Just that. A judgment so cold and casual it made me physically step away from my laptop, like the screen had turned radioactive. It was the kind of thing you never say to someone you love, unless you want them to bleed from the inside. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't open a floodgate I had spent years trying to keep closed. But something changed in me in that moment. A clarity I hadn't felt in a long time settled over my skin, and it didn't feel like rage, it felt like resolve. I booked a flight to Maui. Not to scream. Not to cry. Not even to make a scene. But to look every single one of them in the eye. The flight to Maui was cramped, loud, and filled with sticky children kicking the back of my seat, but I sat there silently, knees aching and heart pounding under the weight of everything I hadn't said for years. I didn't check a bag because I knew I wouldn't stay long, and when I landed, I didn't post a story or tell a soul what I was doing there. I booked the cheapest hotel I could find, some cracked tile motor in a half-mile off the beach, the kind of place with buzzing fluorescent lights and water pressure that felt like a weak spit. The kind of place that gave you permission to be nobody. And for once, I leaned into that no expectations, no small talk, no family history creeping up behind me in polite smiles and frozen dinners. I walked into the resort where they were staying just after 6, wearing sunglasses that covered half my face and a blue linen dress I bought on clearance the day before. I didn't come to make a scene, not really, but I needed to see them. I needed to stand in front of the people who spent my entire life claiming we're just trying to keep the peace while handing me the bill for their silence. The lobby was gaudy in the way only expensive tropical resorts can be, glass chandeliers made to look like coral, fake koi swimming beneath clear walkways, and a concierge in a white uniform smiling, so wide you'd think his jaw was on commission. They were standing near the check-in counter, my parents thumbing through luau brochures, Brianna flipping her hair at some poor front desk worker like she expected a sweet upgrade just for showing up with cheekbones. Tom was behind them, holding 2 pina coladas in coconut shells, the kind that cost $20 and still taste like sunscreen. I saw them before they saw me, and for a moment I stood completely still, just watching them in their element, the perfectly rehearsed performance of a happy family on vacation, untouched by guilt, unbothered by absence. Then my mother looked up and froze. Her mouth opened slightly, just enough for her lipstick to crack. Brianna turned next, and the second our eyes met, her shoulders stiffened like a puppet yanked by the string of an uncomfortable memory. No one spoke. My father's face moved through 5 emotions before settling on something between concern and annoyance, and Tom, bless him, stared at his drink like it held the answers to the universe. I said, Brianna finally muttered, her voice low and thin, I didn't want drama. I took off my sunglasses slowly and let the silence stretch, so wide you could have driven a golf cart through it. Then I looked at her, steady and unblinking, and said, Sweetheart, you caused drama. I just gave it a name and a door lock. No one laughed. My mother reached out and touched my arm gently, as if trying to guide me away from something dangerous. "Vanessa, honey," she started. That tone again, the one they use when they want you to feel like the unreasonable one at the table. But I wasn't playing that part anymore. Dinner was at the on-site restaurant, one of those places where they serve tiny pieces of fish on giant white plates with smear art and garnish that looks like weeds. We sat at a circular table, for adults who share blood but somehow less and less in common with each passing year, and Tom spent most of the meal nodding silently and trying not to make eye contact with anyone except the waiter. Brianna kept calling me vindictive, like it was a polite nickname, her voice high and tight, and practiced like she'd said it to herself in the mirror before I arrived. "You locked us out without a word," she said, somewhere between the bread basket and the butter that tasted like rosemary and regret. "That's not just dramatic, that's cruel. We had no place to go." "You had 6 months of free rent," I replied calmly, reaching for my water. "You could have gone anywhere. Hell, you could have gone home if you'd finished the renovations you started." Tom tried to jump in, his voice barely above a whisper. It was just bad timing, that's all, but no one gave him the floor, and frankly, I don't think he wanted it. My father cleared his throat, that same old signal that we were supposed to wrap up the conflict and move on to the next course of denial, but I ignored it. My mother tried twice to shift the conversation to the food, praising the ahi tuna like it was the solution to our years of dysfunction, but the tension clung to our shoulders like the humidity, and no amount of sea salt or soy glaze could cut through it. After the plates were cleared, before the waiter could offer the dessert menu, I asked for the check. The server hesitated, eyes flicking toward my father, who gave the smallest nod of relief, as if handing over the financial baton meant control had returned to its rightful owner. But I took the leather folder, slid my card in, and paid in silence while my sister stewed across the table. When the receipt arrived, I signed it with a flourish, stood up slowly, and looked around the table one last time. Not to make a statement, not to leave them with guilt, but to anchor what I was about to say into the core of who I had finally decided to be. "That's the last free thing any of you are getting from me." Then I walked out. The air outside was cooler than I expected. The scent of plumeria carried on the breeze like it was daring me to cry, but I didn't. I didn't even look back to see if anyone followed, because for the first time in my life, I didn't need to be seen by them to exist. I already knew who I was. And maybe, just maybe, that was the whole damn point. The night I got home from Maui, the house felt different, and not just because I'd walked away from one of the most awkward family dinners in the history of Western civilization. There was an unfamiliar stillness to it, like the air had shifted somehow, grown lighter, cleaner, as though the absence of certain people had vacuumed out something rotten I'd been too used to breathing in. The driveway was empty, no more of Tom's oversized SUV parked crooked across the curb like he'd landed it from the sky and couldn't quite manage to park like a normal human being. The side gate no longer creaked from constant use. The back porch was free of Brianna's outdoor yoga mat that she never cleaned. And the patio chairs finally sat in perfect formation without anyone dumping a soggy beach towel over them like they were built for drying laundry. I spent 2 days doing absolutely nothing, which for me meant a lot of standing still and trying not to plan anything. I didn't open my laptop. I didn't respond to texts. I didn't call anyone to give a full report. I didn't even go through the photos I'd taken, not that there were many. I just sat in my clean, quiet living room and listened to the house breathe. That's how I started thinking about the guest house again, not in the way that made my stomach turn like it had for months, but as an actual space with potential. By the end of the week, I had listed it on Airbnb, spent one Saturday morning staging it with new pillows, towels, and some fake succulents that wouldn't die from neglect. The bookings rolled in faster than I expected. First a couple from Portland, then a travel nurse from Austin, and eventually a guy who stayed for 2 weeks and left a 5-star review saying the shower pressure was so good it felt illegal. Within a month, I had made more than I would have if Brianna and Tom had been paying actual rent, which of course they never did. And with every guest who left the space exactly how they found it, with neatly folded sheets and kind notes about the scent of the lavender hand soap, a little piece of bitterness chipped off me and floated away. That lasted exactly 33 days. Then came the text from my mom, late on a Wednesday night, as if she had waited until she thought I'd be half asleep and less likely to bite back. It said, "Your sister wants to apologize. Can she come by?" Nothing else. No, how are you? No hope. Maui was good. Just a direct drop into the middle of a wound that had barely started to scab over. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew exactly what kind of moment this was, the kind where you decide what kind of woman you're going to be for the rest of your life. I replied with 4 words, "She can come alone." And then I waited. The doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. It was warm out, the kind of California spring day that tricks you into thinking everything's fine just because the sun's out. Brianna stood on the porch looking smaller than I remembered, wearing an oversized hoodie and jeans that swallowed her whole, no makeup, hair in a bun that looked more like a cry for help than a style choice. She didn't even say hello. She just walked in when I opened the door and sat on the edge of the couch like she thought it might bite her if she leaned back. "I never thought it would go this far," she said, eyes darting around the room, refusing to land on me. "I thought it would blow over like it always does. I didn't think you'd actually lock us out. I didn't think you'd go to Maui. I didn't think you'd change." I didn't say anything. I wanted her to keep talking because the truth tends to spill better when no one interrupts. And eventually it did. "They paid for everything," she said quietly, and when I tilted my head, she added, "The trip. The flights. The hotel. They paid for it all." She paused, swallowed hard, "But only if you didn't come. They said you'd just make everything about you." It landed like a brick in the center of my chest, not because it was shocking, but because it wasn't. I had known, somewhere in the background of my mind, that I wasn't excluded because I was unavailable or too busy or forgotten. I was removed, intentionally, as a condition of someone else's comfort. And it was the kind of truth that didn't sting as much as it burned. I looked at Brianna then, finally meeting her eyes. She looked like someone who'd been chewing on guilt so long it had turned bitter and chalky. "Do you even believe that?" I asked her, and my voice didn't shake. "That I make everything about me?" She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Her lips pressed together and trembled slightly, and for the first time, I saw that she truly didn't know. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't have the courage to say it. Either way, the silence was loud enough. I stood up slowly, walked to the front door, and opened it wide. She didn't move. "I think you should go now," I said, my voice calm and even. She looked at me, blinked, and for a moment, I thought she might finally say something honest. But she didn't. She just stood up and walked out, down the steps and into the fading sunlight. I closed the door behind her without saying goodbye. And as I leaned back against it, eyes closed, breath steady, I thought to myself, she wanted no drama. But she forgot who she was living with.